Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Lebret. I'm here today on the invitation of the Sarajevo Film Festival to speak about the condition when working with the streamers. I'm the managing director of the European Producers Club, which is an organization that gathers 150, 60 maybe now, independent producers coming from 30 countries in Europe plus Canada. And I'm very proud today to have this conversation about this super important topic for us. What is the role that the streamers have taken into our industry, and what is the consequences? What are the consequences on the independent sector? I'm here today, a fantastic panelist, of course, Chris Marcich, who is the CEO of the Croatian Audiovisual Center, Lars Loge from the Norwegian Film Institute, and Martichka Bozhilova, a producer, member of the EBC, I'm proud of it, from AgitProp in Bulgaria, Pauline Durand-Vialle, the CEO of FERA, the Federation of European Directors. We all know that the lockdown have been an accelerator of process existing in our industry, and I've seen the predominance of the streamers in terms of audiences they reach, but also in terms of business model they are bringing with them. They are really a great opportunity for industry as long as they take part to the financing of it, to the protection of it, to part of the ecosystem of it. The European Commission has given the member states a way to protect that local industry with a regulatory tool that regulatory tool that allow member states to impose investment obligation for these platforms in order to invest into the local ecosystem. But these investment obligations are very difficult to implement in certain countries, and in particular the little producing country. And even in some big countries such as Spain, these investment obligations are driven. There's a big pressure of the streamers to have this investment obligation driven to in-house production. At the EPC, we do feel that the independent sector is in danger. We do feel that we need protection to have the financing of these platforms going to the independent sector, respecting the European business model. And that's why last March, we launched a code of fair practices when working with the streamers that is a very simple in 4 points, a very, very simple one, which said that first, an independent producers should keep revenues and rights of the IP it created, even if the IP is financed, IP intellectual property is financed 100% by the streamers, that the producers should keep also the ancillary rights and the secondary rights of the work, meaning that it should not be take away of the season 2 of the series he created, for instance, and that he should also have access to data transparency about the work he produced, what is the audience, and not only raw data, but really detailed data, and as well as having the money the independent producers can bring to the project thanks to the film center, to the Norwegian film center, or to should correspond to the share of the independent producers within the financing of the work. So this code was really launched to create awareness about a danger that we can feel as independent producer. But maybe I wanted first to have a first question about you panelists, and in particular, Chris. Do you think that we are exaggerating the situation, or do you think that there is really then a danger to react and to act and to protect the local sector?
Well, thank you very much. And I congratulate you on the Code of Fair Practice. It should be a helpful tool if it gets some momentum behind it. No, I don't think you're exaggerating at all, maybe underestimating the problems for small countries. From our perspective, our independent producers are basically at risk of becoming and are becoming an endangered species because of the directive. I don't think it's fit for purpose. I don't think it promotes cultural diversity because the Commission has turned a deaf ear to comments that we have been making, I have been making for 2 years now, on the need to cater to the particular needs of smaller countries. And because of brutal lobbying by the major streamers in small countries where they can get away with things that they can't get away with in big countries, big markets. So you're not exaggerating at all, and I'm happy to go into detail on the 3 reasons why I think you're absolutely right, and why if something's not done, we will really become an endangered species. Cultural diversity certainly will not be served, and we will see the emergence of, they are already becoming the major streamers, gatekeepers that provide core essential services. And without them, whether you like them or not, I think they could be very positive. But without them, without access to them, without some incentive for them to look at independent productions in small countries, and there it's not just the independent producers, it's also our authors who will be damaged, are being damaged. It's going to be very difficult to survive in the way in which we exist now, at least. So yeah, you're not exaggerating.
Martichka, do you want to react and give the position of you as a producer? Am I exaggerating? Do you see the future as not dark, but a dangerous period?
Thank you, Alexandra. I think we are already endangered species. It's not that this is coming, especially filmmakers from our small countries. I'm based in Sofia, Bulgaria, being producer for more than 15 years now. Always struggling to get my place on the market, because first, before that, in Bulgaria, cinemas nearly disappeared. We used to have like 60 cinema screens when I started. Now with the pandemic, theatrical release nearly disappeared. At the same time, platforms are overtaking. And here in my country, we still don't have the word platform in any kind of law or legislation or some kind of directive or anything like that. So I have to find myself, my place and the place of my directors and the films, really looking for in the jungle of what's going on internationally and in the platforms, to find them by myself. And actually, I feel a bit stuck, you know, between the wishes to work with the platforms on one hand, and on the other hand, really trying to protect our voice and the wishes of the filmmakers that I'm working with.
Thank you. That's true. That it's a very difficult exercise to tell these platforms that are, again, an opportunity for us, that we want to work with them, but not under that condition. And it's always a balance that is very difficult to reach. When we launched that Code of Fair Practices, we were surprised by the range of people supporting it. It was not only producers, but also people coming from other parts of the industry. And in particular, Pauline, FERA, we had from FERA, we had some directors joining us, and And for me, it was a surprise, because I thought that maybe the directors would be super happy to be hired directly by the platforms and having a chance to skip the producer. But I think that a lot of your members are in favor of regulating this relationship. Pauline, can you tell us about what is your feeling about this situation?
Yeah, I think you're quite correct in your assessment of how our community perceives the arrival of these new players on the European market. Of course, everybody's happy to work, especially in these times post-confinement, where, as we know, shooting was an impossibility and then became a warrior task for everybody is involved. So voila, on that front, of course, all work is very welcome. But there is no denying that, let's say that the business model that these platforms bring in and the impact on the local industry in that very peculiar moment of rolling out the consequences of the crisis on the sector is definitely challenging the diversity of expression that will be possible to put forth in the future. So for filmmakers, the fact that maybe in certain countries you will not be allowed to express yourself in any way, shape or form, even if it's a great entertainment and not necessarily the most intimate art house expression, that is really very challenging. So there is a sort of a freedom of expression, of artistic expression issue at heart here. And on the more industrial side, of course, the partnership with producers is not something that happens only once in a, like a very temporary thing. This concept of having executive producers in front of you and not necessarily a producer that can maybe accompany you in your career, artistic career, and so on is really challenging, because even if you're not going to necessarily have the same producer when you work with Netflix and when you work on the development of your third feature, it doesn't matter. There needs to be a producer who can actually do this job of actually moving forward with different projects. And that requires, of course, independence and sustainability of business model for the independents. Just like we need sustainability of career development, which is an awful way to say, a way to keep on working in that very particular job that directing is, but that's also, of course, true for screenwriters and all other creatives and talent involved. So for us also, the issue of royalties payment is definitely there, and how we can somehow get a better sense of the relationship with the audience on these platforms. But maybe we'll talk about transparency of data and what that means a little bit later.
Thank you, Pauline. Lars, what is your feeling coming from Norway, where you are a little country but highly producing and highly demanded by these platforms and highly talented in series? What is your feeling?
Well, yeah, you are right. And first, thank you for letting me join in here. And you are right. In Norway, even during the pandemic, there was a tendency that there was more production than there had been for a while. So we had quite a few crisis packages stimulating for production, focusing on realizing the productions that were ongoing. Also pushing funding into development so that people could develop new content as the pandemic rolled out. And obviously now we're seeing, as the cinemas are opening up and people are worrying about the market and how the audience will react, we are seeing what some kind of jokingly calls the bloodbath of too many Norwegian films going out at the same time, killing each other in distribution. So how does the streamers come into this? They come in the sense that now the Norwegian producers are starting to finance their projects with I don't have the sums but of the streamers, but their cinema window is being challenged by them being able to sell to the streaming platforms at the same time. which is creating quite a lot of conflict, obviously, between the cinemas and the streamers. And we, as a national film fund, are getting challenged all the way of demanding a longer window behind our funding. So we're trying to find out, how do we relate to the international streamers coming in, and the way we've decided right now is that, at least because we're becoming increasingly decreasingly important part of the global market for the Norwegian producers. So at least we can say that we can equip the Norwegian independent producers with thorough development funding so that they can position themselves in a very complex market. That means that they can maybe get 3 times as much for developing a project now, in order to both to get the artistic and financial strategy in place, so that they reach a point where they decide for production where they can choose themselves. Either they can go for all rights with the streamers. That means that they will never get funding from us. We then retreat from the project. And it's not because we think it's bad that they go to the streamers. I mean, if that's who they produce for, then fine. But it's protecting the national funding towards national content and national producers and directors. So our entire fund no longer will be available for those who who give away their IP rights. They have to own them themselves.
That's a very good answer, and as you said, you are under pressure on many sides, the windows and the IP. Can you? I'm not sure I understand your concept of decreasingly involved.
Yeah, yeah, that's as big of a linguistic problem as it is a content problem. The market has grown substantially the last 5 years, much due to the streamers. So the roads that a producer can take to realize their project is becoming more and more broad towards the streamers. Our fund is not growing annually significantly, so we have to figure out how our limited funding gets the highest possible effect, which means that it's going to be harder, that it will be no chance to finance production funding of projects that are not owned by Norwegian independent producers. And we also have to put the money into development. Positioning of the Norwegian producer in this market will be increasingly important.
That's a very good answer. Chris, what tools do you have at your disposal to protect the independent sector? You are negotiating 2%, 5% of investment obligation. Do you dedicate them for the independent sector? How do you protect the fact that the producers keep the IP? What are the tools you are developing to enhance your local ecosystem?
So we provide financing for production. It's stable from year to year, including during the pandemic, and there. The presumption is that the independent productions the producers will be able to keep their rights, and that they can be protected in that way. What we're trying to do with the new law and the implementation of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive is introduce an investment requirement. And our estimate have been that at least 5% of revenues generated in Croatia would need to be invested in independent production. And we had a lot of ups and downs with that. There was intense lobbying, not to say bullying here, with implicit threats of leaving the market if we introduced investment obligations from 3 major streaming platforms together, by the way. In the end, the legislation will have a 2% investment obligation for independent productions. Hopefully it will grow. The ministry provides assurances in that direction, but now the legislation says 2%. We may get some improvement in Parliament that's going into second and final reading in September. So we're trying there, and we're also looking at more investments from telcos, believe it or not. It looks like as they're positioning themselves to compete in the market, we have two major international players coming in. We will have an obligation for them to invest in independent production, which could be the dark horse savior in this race if the predictions materialize. We'll see, and then broadcasters with a national license, private broadcasters with a national license, will need to be investing initially 2%, but going up to 5% of their revenues in independent production. So we're trying to build up investments from other sources in the independent production. That should provide some relief. Although the market position of broadcasters has slipped as it has everywhere with the advent of streaming.
And do you reinvent yourself as well as the Norwegian Film Institute as explainers, your role, the way you invest into independent production with this new context, or you just securize and secure your local legal framework before going into details in your own fund and the way you finance project?
We certainly focus on securing the sources, but we're also in the law trying to provide some guidance to make sure that that the investment is in independent production, so rights retention. There's a whole code of good practices that have been agreed with broadcasters, and the concepts are, in line with what you've been doing at the APC, not as ambitious. So we're trying to build that into the law and strengthen the position of the independent producers, so they retain more rights, so that they can develop, so that they can eventually build up some libraries. It would be nice to have some even medium-sized producers who have a library, who would be working with authors, directors here, and developing the base basically for the future. And so, yeah, we do try to encourage movement in that direction, but the focus initially was on getting the sources secured.
Martichka, what are your needs when you are listening to Lars and Chris? What are your needs? How do you feel that you need to be changed, or where do you need to be accompanied in order to grow and to continue to produce? And what are the big threats? Lars mentioned the windowing. I mentioned the IP, as well as Lars and Chris. What is your most urgent needs? What are, sorry.
Actually, I'm encountering the same issues that were mentioned already, although I would wish our film center would already point out these tasks and goals, like in the Norwegian Film Institute or even Croatian Audiovisual Center, because in my country, it's one of the very, very few countries where the budget for film is coming directly from the state. It's not a funding system, which makes it even more complicated, and it's not possible actually to negotiate with the corporations in media, etc., for any kind of investment. So for us, is really a challenge. So there are two ways for me as a producer. One is the traditional one, European co-production construction, that is the classical one. and that is very, very difficult at the moment in terms of pandemic situation. At the same time, since my background is documentary film production, and actually this panel is produced by Documentary Campus, for the sake of it, I must say that I can really see a trend at the moment that a lot of independent producers, especially from my region, they are investing themselves together with the filmmakers in order to keep the independence of the production and to make more possible, to make a better deal with a streamer, or really to try to keep the IP for the future when the things are getting more better for us as filmmakers. These I can see a lot. Even the projects you are going to see here at Cinelink in Sarajevo that are in the work in progress section are very much like this as well.
So I know that the situation of the documentaries is the same as feature films and TV series, as there's also that boom that the streamers are having, that appetite for the documentaries. But you mentioned the fact that there is another model when you were working with the broadcasters and working with the streamers. We spoke about the IP. What about the data transparency? Is it something that is important for you as a producer? And then to Pauline, isn't a key question for you for the future as well?
Of course, I think this must be part of the entire rules and regulations in the future, and that Europe and European Union must have this obligation to make it in a proper way, especially within Europe, because otherwise we are really entering very risky zone, and a lot of countries, like my country, for example, are really not relevant in that sense, because we are really small streamer. We are the last stop for any kind of original investment, for original content, etc. So it's very important for us. And it's relevant in how ambitious we want to go, because producers like myself, we are really aiming ambitious. So for us, this is very important, how we make it locally, but also internationally, and this must be regulated as soon as possible.
Pauline, I think this is one of the most important points of the Code of Fair Practices that EPC reached, getting data transparency, because it's all about knowing the audience for which we are creating the work. What is your position in that?
So from the perspective of the filmmakers community, data transparency would be essential because of two reasons. One is purely economical, and it has to do with the fact that clearly, if you have no clue of the actual following and success of the work towards the audience, there is a massive problem for you to evaluate the value of your intellectual property that we transfer partially or in entirety to the producers or to the platform, depending on the type of contracts we're looking at. But definitely, in order to negotiate properly your royalties payment, if you have no clue about the performance of the work towards the audience, then you're basically negotiating blindfolded, and we all know how that ends. So that's not ideal. The second part of it is maybe a little bit more complex, and clearly is a little bit difficult, I think, sometimes to absorb when we're looking at industry discussions. It has to do with, imagine a world where you don't have any idea of the reaction of the audience to your content? How do you build yourself as a creator or even as a very talented entertainer if you have no clue of the reaction of the audience towards what you create? What are you going to develop in the future? Are you going to develop only what a commissioner tells you to do based on an algorithm? How do you make your writing evolve? How do you make everything? Because all of this is a little bit more subtle than just getting instructions from somebody over Zoom who is having access to that data. We need to have a more sensitive relationship to this, to what the audience absorbs. And we know about, the change of demographics. We know about the multiplicity of screens. And of course, when you create for a small screen, it's not the same thing as creating for the big screen. So of course, everybody evolves slightly. But if you listen to the greatest filmmakers we have in Europe today, we've had a couple of these people telling us in various events that we organized last year that actually this creative blindfold that is put on their eyes, even if it comes with tons of money for the budget, is really, really bad for them. Because as creators, as I said, they need to have a bit of, relationship with the audience to build forward. So I think these two aspects need to be kept in mind. And as far as the rest of what was said, I would say that this blindfold thing comes with the rest of the business model of these platforms, which is mercifully understood and not necessarily fought, but at least tackled by our film funding system in Europe, is the risk of commoditizing content, of making it small and insignificant. Just let's produce for the sake of producing, and just let's do that. That's enough. No need for IP, no need for anything. We know where that leads. That's, if you make the comparison with food, this is fast food. And even if we all love fast food, sometimes in our lives, we also like slow food, and we want to still be able to eat that as consumers, right? So I think it's pretty much the same when we're looking at the evolution of the business model that we're seeing today. And strangely enough, it happens to us much later than it has happened in other industries, and we're being very naive about it. So I think it's really great that we can actually discuss this and be a little bit more firm in ourselves. This is not only, fancy talk about cultural diversity or freedom of creation. This is about the quality of what we want for our kids, our parents, our neighbors to watch. This is what we're talking about. It's not only about the money. It's also about, our souls. I know it sounds stupid to say it like that, but there is something about that going on. And I think it's, I think transparency of data is one important piece of that big picture.
It's so agreeable to see someone so passionate, even by Zoom, Pauline. That's fantastic. And you were speaking about some sensitive reaction, and we're having a question from the chat, which is also a reaction from a Zoom that I would like to answer. The question regards the rest of the streamers. We are speaking a lot about the big streamers, but are the questions that we are raising the same for the local streamers? Lars, you have a lot of local streamers in your country. Are the issues that we are discussing the same for them, for the other players? I know, for instance, that in certain countries, I would not denunciate anyone, but the streamers are taking advantage of this new business model to push the old business model in that direction, and to ask all the rights and to create originals and to apply the same business model. That's the case, for instance, in France. Do you have also that in your country? And
see, I had forgotten how this worked. In a long and nice summer. I'm sorry. We do have some local streamers, absolutely, and Nordic streamers, and our relation to them is it's basically the same when it comes to the rights question. We don't deal differently with the smaller streaming services, because our focus is quite hard on the independence of the producer. So there are no particular other moves that we have towards smaller streamers, no. I just want to add as well that we also have a process. We're very slow in Norway to actually implement the what we call the investment demands for the streamers into Norwegian content, but we hope that this will be settled this fall or maybe next spring, and we're probably going to land somewhere, like Chris is saying, around 5 to 8%. We don't know. It's up to the cultural department, but that's a parallel process to us tightening our regulations towards the streamers.
That's a very low level. I've read that Netflix has announced 70 shows to be commissioned in the Nordic. 70, you know, that's why I understand the question about the streamers being not reachable for filmmakers, but actually they are going in deeply into local markets. Yes. And not only the bigger one, but also in little countries, because they want to be local, and that's great. But they are coming in.
They are, and the duality of it is what we're discussing here is difficult to navigate in, because it's very positive that they want local and regional content, of course, and in some cases it gives the producers the ability to go from a local market to a global market as well, if you have that on your CV, to put it that way. But protecting the cultural significance of the Norwegian culture, which is of course the main aim of the National Film Institute, that is not directly satisfied by the investments of the streamers. So what I wish for is that there also a solid part. This is just my personal opinion. This is not the department, but to have money funded through the public financing, I think would have a much more focused effect for each local culture's output of their own stories. So some reinvestment in regional content, but also some money funded into the public funders.
Chris, how do you react to this question?
Well, there have been a lot of interesting comments on that question. We do see local streamers coming into the market. They're frequently, or at least amongst them, you have exhibitors wanting to set up a streaming service. They want to condition their deals with producers on acquiring the rights for the linguistic basin here. And so they have the same, I mean, I suppose it's an instinct of business to try to get all of the rights you can. But the streamers we have here don't have reach beyond the linguistic basin. And so they don't offer the same temptation that an international streamer will offer to a producer. And in fact, they can take themselves out of the market with the international streamers if they start to chop up the rights. In fact, we're seeing, as one of the consequences of this directive, whether intended or not, a diminution of the importance of territoriality as such. And I think the directive has made it clear that all rights included, global rights included, is a model that is taking hold. Territorial licensing exists. It will continue to exist. I think for some of us, it's essential. For others, like the big players, it's not. It's a kind of a safety net for profit maximization. But they're moving into the global all rights environment. So, and I suppose in reaction to an earlier point on data, I agree with Pauline. Data is crucial. We producers, authors need to know what's happening with their works. And as I said earlier, these international streamers are becoming gatekeepers, and they decide what will be streamed where, and they also hold all of the data that's necessary for their customers, producers, and rights holders to have. I mean, they have thousands of so-called business clients who make movies, who need the data. to know what how the consumers, the millions of consumers they have, are reacting. So without transparency in data, it will be difficult to understand the market. And also, you know, like it or not, Pauline, artificial intelligence is also a tool that's being increasingly deployed. You know, it may homogenize product in the future. I'm afraid it will, but I can't stop it. And if you don't have the data, you can't feed those models that generate artificial intelligence-based recommendations, analyze alternatives, and whatever AI can do, the magic that it does. So yeah, transparency is crucial.
Yes, there are certainly gatekeepers, and they are becoming more and more important. And when we launched that code of fair practices, people were telling us, "Are you crazy? You are going against the most important and the most powerful people in the world." Pauline, to take your view, your example, it's like fighting McDonald's. You know, how can you fight McDonald's? But you are French, so you can fight McDonald's. Anyway, let's speak about the temptation that represents. Someone mentioned that it's a temptation, and how can we react as an industry to this temptation? They are temptation because they can give a very fast answer, and they can finance easily a work, and they can make a work existing in very fast. Lars, you mentioned the fact that you are now investing usually in development, which is great. At what moment do you decide a producer's? Let's take an example. Martichka is a producer from Norway. She's developing an IP, a documentary series, and she's coming to you to have a funding of her project. And at a certain point, she decides that maybe she will work with a streamer. Is that possible? At what point do you decide that it's not possible and this is not a work for, how do you manage that?
Sorry, I think quite simply in the way that we do finance the development phase, and if in the development phase Martichka finds out that she's going to the streamers and selling the all rights, then it's fine by us. You keep the financing and you go on with a new partner, and that could be in development phase 1, 2, or 3. So we actually just focus on the Norwegian independents developing the best possible content that they can and position this content to wherever this particular project's audience is. So we want to make it easy and kind of prevent the famous sprint towards production that all European producers go through, where you don't get enough time to develop your script, you don't get enough time to test actors, to do the casting, to all the content stuff that you should be able to do in economic, calm waters. We want to make that more possible, and we also want the producer to have more funding in order to set up a financial plan for this project. And if that financial plan involves a streamer where he or she wants to sell and all rights, then it's fine in the development phase. You won't get funding if you've already sold your IP. But if you change it in the midst of development, then so be it, because then you have made a financial plan, business plan for this project. You will just not get any production funding from us. And in that, we've already experienced a couple times or 3, because we changed these regulations in March or in February this year. We've already had quite friendly phone calls from drama series producers saying that they're in a much better negotiation position towards the streamers, when they can actually say that the streamer has to choose if they want to reduce their financial risk by by letting go of the IP to the independent producer, and the independent producer can get financing of, let's say, 10 to 60% of the project. That will obviously be cheaper for the streamer, but they have to leave all rights with the producer, and they have to reduce the territories, as you're saying, Chris. So we want to strengthen the producer in the situation where they go to the main financer, that they can tell Netflix that you have to buy everything if you want the rights. You have to pay for absolutely everything. But we would like to sell you a limited time and territory limited license, which would then be cheaper for Netflix, and we would finance production, and then hopefully, and then most likely it would be a production with Norwegian cultural content in Norwegian in the streaming platform. It's just an example. So well done, Martichka. Assessing your application live was very nice.
Martichka, do you feel that you have a bargaining power as an independent producer when you are speaking with big players?
It's situation you described sounds like utopia for the moment. What I feel strong because I have great talent behind, and I represent really talented filmmakers, and also I put a lot of efforts myself to educate myself throughout this couple of years, really how to approach, how to pitch, how to communicate within these changes, and having the streamers already as main players. At the same time, I really would wish that there can be a situation for co-production like it was so far, by the way, for example, with HBO, that was very strong within Eastern Europe until recently. Now situation is changing there as well because of the competitive market. I'm looking forward to really diversifying the market, because Europe is so complicated, and we really need a new kind of possibilities or startups. Like we have quite positive experience with movie, for example, that we had our movie Touch Me Not that won Berlinale a couple of years ago. So they have different model, but unfortunately they don't produce originally, or maybe they are thinking about it in a different condition, which can be much more friendly to the independent filmmakers, and much more supportive. I'm not sure whether this will work, but maybe this direction can help.
Someone in the chat, the same Jan, I believe that the other one, we have only one people attending our event, has asked, I said that we will never succeed in having in having what we are asking for, that we only regulation will bring us that. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I did agree with that comment. I think that some additional regulation and monitoring is needed to keep the gatekeepers in line, basically. I don't believe in over-regulating, but I think the state has some responsibilities. And we've had long discussions about this within our ministry, which, by the way, it's crucial to have a ministry that understands the issues and at least tries to find solutions within the limits of what they feel they can do under pressure. And we have that luxury. The ministry is very understanding, and we've talked precisely about that. There is an insufficient amount of harmonization at the European level to really avoid a situation in which the gatekeepers can do whatever they want, and can also do a sort of a divide et impera sort of approach in Europe, which they're doing quite well. I mean, they treat my region, Martichka's region, differently to how they position themselves vis-a-vis others in the EU, and also differently to what they say publicly in European discussion forums, where they show a lot of flexibility and understanding that doesn't translate into concrete performance. And to get the concrete performance, you do need legislation to deal with data, to provide some baseline for smaller countries to find their place and to continue to be able to have outlets for the content they create. In monitoring, I think, the Digital Markets Act is an interest. I've been reading that lately, and I think that's an interesting regulation that that has as its goal to deal with gatekeepers precisely, has some definitions in there. But in any event, I think that concept has some application to the challenges we face. And without something like that, it's going to be difficult.
Pauline, do you agree? Chris is using a lot the word of gatekeeper, which refers to a regulation that is under discussion at the EC level regarding the digital. It's called the Digital Market Act, and it's I'm just explaining that for the audience, and that tries to regulate the business relation between these gatekeepers and the business users. And not taking advantage of a dominant position. Do you agree, as Chris, that these platforms are gatekeeper and they are controlling the market?
Well, I think if we're speaking in general industrial terms, absolutely. I think that's something that we see in the daily dealings that all the parts of the industry has in terms of interactions with these players. However, the problem that we have is that these two texts, the DSA, DMA package, are very interesting in the concepts that they lay out, but somehow it seems that global streamers and the audiovisual industry completely fall into right in between the cracks of these general definitions and what is trying to be tackled by the European legislator in this particular instance. And
that's why you're there, Pauline.
That's true. However,
and Alexandra and others, it's something that's worth looking at.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you also have, when you're a small lobbyist like myself, I'm saying this in very intently, like 1.5 persons in an office in Brussels doesn't give you the clout to negotiate something that would be truly meaningful in such a complex generalistic package that deals with fake news as well as whatever the planet needs. It's a bit complex for us to be efficient about. However, I think this is a beautiful opportunity for us to really very loudly say, and in that sense, we're very happy to work with the EPC on that, to say, well, I mean, if this text is not the right vehicle, you still have to take care of that issue, because this gatekeeping problem of these new players will have an impact on the sustainability of our sector, on cultural diversity, on whatever policies you want to develop at local level to still have an industry that can provide entertainment and art house audiovisual works. So there is a real hook there for us to really fight for something that will hopefully lead to better harmonizations of these provisions that we see translating at national level on the AVMS directive, which has to do with investment of these players. And really, it also allows for us to keep on talking about this with the different people involved. Otherwise, in Brussels, you might risk 5 years of complete silence because your issues are not popping up anywhere in legislation. So
that's right.
In that sense, it's really good for us to keep campaigning and to really try and find where we can find the proper European legal hook to really sink our teeth in.
I think so. Yeah, video sharing platforms are within scope, so it's not that the sector is entirely out. And I agree with you. We have to use these debates to put more of a focus, to put a focus on the sorts of issues we've been talking about, which are market failures. The Commission is there to resolve some of these. In my humble view, they should have some sense of responsibility and obligation to address these sorts of issues.
Yeah, we do also have the European Parliament with a number of MEPs who are quite sensitive to these, to what's at stake here, which is highly political and completely has to do with retaining something, retaining economic value, retaining an ability to speak to our own local audiences in the way that we instinctively feel is right. You were talking about AI and the link with data. Of course, AI is now present in editing a little bit, in virtual production solutions, of course, and you know what, that's probably the way of history, right? But nonetheless, if those technical solutions are developed completely outside of our remits by global players who really design these tools in a way that is completely outside of our own instinct and our own habitus in terms of producing and creating, then we're going to have a big problem because they're going to own the IP of these tools and we're going to be even more dependent. So it's a little bit like what happened with screening in theaters. You know, when we moved to digital technology, all of a sudden, you know, all the technology to screen was no longer ours, and that's additional costs and everything that comes with it. So yeah, there is definitely something in terms of anchoring ourselves and our economy and our ways in European legislation more, for sure.
So this is so good. I don't know how to conclude, you know, better than that, than with Pauline's words. We need to, this is a strong message that we need to send to the European regulators and the national as well about the need to repair these market failures, as you said, that these gatekeepers are using to their own advantage, and in which we can disappear very soon. And it's a call also for unity, and Pauline, you're representing the directors, you are here as a film center, and I think it's super important that we make that call as an industry problem. It's not a producer problem, it's not an author problem, it's an industry problem. So that's the what can I say more? Come and join us. Come and join us. We are here to defend the independent sector, and we want to work with the streamers as well. So that's we want them to produce our content, but on the way where we are protected and we can continue to produce high quality of project and knowing the audience for which we are producing. So come and join. And thank you so much, Pauline, Chris, Martichka, and Lars, for your contribution. You have been very clear and very helpful, and we can see that everyone is trying to move in the right direction. Thank you very much.